The protagonist of my presentation is the painter, graphic artist, illustrator, and set designer Gyula Zilzer, who is linked to my dissertation research topic that is new objectivity. And even though he identified himself as Hungarian throughout his whole life, he mainly lived outside his native country. First, very briefly in Trieste, Italy, then for 2 years in Germany, then, which I'm going to talk about, his 8 years in France, and he eventually settled in the United States, where he would die in 1969. My presentation will focus on his Parisian period, which lasted from 1924 to 1932. So after the introduction, I will describe who he was and how he ended up in the French capital. Gyula Zilzer was born on February 3rd in 1898 into a Jewish family at 8 Chinese Street, which is located in the 7th district of Budapest. That is the historical Jewish quarter of the city. His uncle was the famous portrait painter of the monarchy called Antal Zilzer, whose daughter, the sculptor and ceramic artist Hajnalka Zilzer, was Gyula's cousin. So it can be seen that in Zilzer's family there were already artistic affiliations, though he originally didn't want to become an artist himself. After graduating from high school, he started studying at the Hungarian Royal School of Arts and Crafts, where he studied graphic design for 2 years, and his teachers were Ferenc Helbing and Jenő Harangi, who were prominent graphic and poster designers of their time. And it is important to note that Zilzer was not enlisted as a soldier in the First World War, because enlistments were indicated in the bulletins of the school, and there was no sign that if he had been a soldier. Later, he started studying at the Polytechnic University of Budapest, where he studied engineering. And in 1919, a new regime, a new communist regime emerged in Hungary. And in the artistic and social movements, Zilzer was involved in these artistic and social movements. So after the collapse of the regime, he had to flee the country because when Miklós Horthy came into power, his political system declared anyone who was involved in the Soviet Republic of Councils as an enemy. So that's why he had to leave the country. And he went to Trieste, Italy, where he, as he recalls, he dedicated himself first time seriously to painting and drawing. In 1921, he returned to Budapest and started studying at the College of Fine Arts, where his teachers were István Csók and János Vasari. But unfortunately, after a semester, he was dismissed from the college because the law, numerus clausus, came into force, which restricted the number of Jews in higher education. So that was the reason he had to, no, he didn't have to leave. He was dismissed from the college. And after this disappointment, he started studying at the studio of Erzsébet Korb with his friend and also a painter, Emil Kelemen. And Kelemen later cites that the neoclassicist art of Korb heavily influenced the Zilzers, as you can see here on this chalk portrait. And in 1923, Zilzer went to study at the Modern Art School of Hans Hofmanns in Munich. And this art school had indeed modern attitudes towards teaching, because they incorporated the ideas and works of Cézanne, the Cubists, and Kandinsky. And Zilzer, all the time when he spoke about his stay in Munich, emphasized that he was present in the city in November 1923, when Adolf Hitler's beer hall putsch happened. In 1924, he returned to Hungary, where when he produced and published his first important work, that is a series of lithographs in a portfolio titled Kaleidoscope. And he is depicting the human weaknesses, he's saying, on the 14 sheets, for example, depression, misery, stage fright, and jealousy. And in the critics, it is highlighted that the grotesque, futuristic, symbolic manner of Zilzer's is really similar to the tendency that was emerging at that time in Germany. And even though they are not naming this very tendency, it is obvious that they are referring to new objectivity. The album was such a financial success to Zilzer that he could both support his mother, and he could also move to Paris, where he permanently settled for 8 years. And in 1924, when he arrived in the French capital, there was already a group of émigré artists living there. To name a few, Marcel Vértes, Lajos Tihanyi, József Csáky, Gyulai és Béla Ujic, and many more. And they had two main meeting points at the Montparnasse Quarter, that were which were the Café du Dôme and La Rotonde. So they regularly met up there and exchanged ideas. Zilzer, right after the arrival, made contacts with leftist thinkers and writers, Roman Roland and Henri Barbusse, and that was the reason he could start working as an illustrator at journals L'Humanité and Clarté. L'Humanité is a communist journal that is still existing today, and Clarté was a magazine of the Clarté movement, which was founded by Henri Barbusse. In the first years, Zilzer had financial struggles in the French capital, and his friend, the director of Spanish origin, Jean Vigo, even offered him to live with his family apartment for half a year. And he also supported Zilzer as offering to work in his project that would realize later as a short documentarist, surrealistic style movie called Apropos de Nice. And Zilzer worked as an assistant cinematographer in the movie. And it is interesting to mention that the main cinematographer of it was Boris Kaufman, who was the brother of the famous Russian propaganda director Dziga Vertov. Zilzer and Vigo remained close friends until the early death of Jean Vigo that happened in 1934, when he died at the early age of 29 due to tuberculosis. Here you can see a postcard and a letter they exchanged with Zilzer. Now I'd like to talk about a very, very important friend of Zilzer's, who happens to be the world-famous photographer, André Kertész, who took a lot of very, very precious documents, photos about these artists and the artistic circles that were present at that time in Paris. For example, I'm showing now a photo of Béla Witz and Gyula Zilzer having a conversation in a Parisian park. Another photo of Kertész is the proof of that, even though Zilzer is not a well-known artist these days in Hungary, but he was indeed a member of these prominent artistic circles in Paris. And in this photo, you can see Michel Seufort, who was an editor and a writer. The man on the left is Louis Saborn, a Dutch musician and actor. Zilzer himself in the center, and the man on the right is no other than Piet Mondrian, the leading figure of modern art in the first decades of the 20th century. And here you can see that they are having a conversation at the studio of Mondrian. Now I want to open a side note about another very, very important figure who is not an artist, but a poet, the most famous Hungarian poet of the 20th century, Attila József, who studied an academic year in Paris at the Sorbonne. And he, in one of his letters to his sister Jolán, he is mentioning an important event that happened in March 1927 at the Au Sacre du Printemps Gallery. Sorry for my pronunciation, I don't speak French. So that event was the first exhibition of André Kertész, where both the portraits of Zilzer that Kertész took of him and of József himself was exhibited at this exhibition. And József was also mentioning that another fellow Hungarian painter was painting his portrait at that time, who was Vincent Korda, and this portrait of Attila József now is in the collection of Petőfi Literary Museum. And on the right, you can see the memory plaque that is placed on the building where József lived. And to go back to the person I mentioned here in this photo, Michel Seufort was the editor of the L'Esprit Nouveau magazine, where one of the poems of Attila József was published in French. So, side note closed, József was also a member of this very artistic circles where was also Zilzer. And now I'm going to talk about two of Zilzer's most important works that are on the extreme opposite ends of the atmosphere that they are representing. And one is the etching titled At the Jockey Bar, which really captures the vibes of the 20s, the famous Parisian nightlife, and the Année Folle or Roaring 20s, with the partying people and jazz band playing in the background and dancing couples. And the trio in the foreground, two of them can be identified by name. The female figure on the left is Kiki de Montparnasse, who was a painter, and she was more famous for being the model of half of the French capital, actually. And the male figure on the right is Jules Passan, who was a Bulgarian painter living in Paris at that time. And it is interesting that they both had similar nicknames. Kiki's was Queen of the Montparnasse, and Passant's was Prince of the Montparnasse. But there is no clue that if they had been a couple, they were not a couple, but they both had these interesting nicknames. They were both regulars of the bar, the Jockey Bar, which was an American Western-style bar at the Montparnasse Quarter. And it was indeed a hot spot to party, and it had other regular visitants, for example, Tristan Tzara, Man Ray, and it appeared even in the cover of this magazine. Regarding the art historical analysis of this etching, it is obviously showing signs of new objectivity, not only in the grotesque, expressive manner that Zilzer executed, but also the theme that was one of the favorite of the new objectivity tendency, that was the decadent nightlife of the 20s. Now I'm going to move on to the most famous and most important work of Zilzer's, which is the gas attack or gas portfolio, that is a series of lithographs, and it marks the end of Zilzer's Parisian stay, because he left the French capital in 1932. But before that, he created and published this portfolio. And it is about, the portfolio is about a fictional gas attack on Paris. And the sheets are executed in the grotesque, horroristic way that is typical of Zilzer's. And we can ask that, where is this album, what is the genre of this album? And we could say that it is a war album that was a product of the First World War, that in Hungary, artists were sent to the battlefields to capture and report the scenes and events for the civilian population, and to glorify the war, but it's not appearing as a glorious event in these portfolios. And I'd like to mention some of them. Was Mihály Bíró's battlefield drawings, Ernő Barta's quieted battlefields, and Zilzer could be also inspired by the works of Otto Dix's Der Krieg portfolio and Georg Gross's Hintergrund portfolio. We can also ask that why is he depicting a fictional gas attack on the French capital? He chose this topic because it was so, there was a constant fear after the First World War that if another war would break out, it would definitely be a devastating gas war, because ever in history, gas weapons were used in the First World War, and they had this premonition that it definitely will be another, like what happened at Ypern. And so that's why he's depicting this topic. And to show how actual it was, another Hungarian photographer, Lucien Aigner, also made a series that you can see here, a series of photographs, Paris protecting its inhabitants against gas attacks. And he is showing the use of the gas masks. To close my presentation, I'm going to talk about the letter that Albert Einstein wrote to Zilzer. Zilzer moved to the US in 1932, And Einstein was touring in the States, giving lectures. And he was about to return to Europe in March 1933. And through the connections Zilzer had with Romain Rolland and Henri Barbusse, who were the members of the anti-fascist, anti-war movement, in which Albert Einstein was also involved, Zilzer was able to hand over a piece of the album personally to the physicist. And Einstein was so amazed by the portfolio that he wrote a letter to Zilzer. And now I'm going to read out one of his lines that made this book receive the attention which is so well deserved, and may it be instrumental in awakening the conscience of mankind. And it was such a boost to the portfolio of Zilzer's that it was reprinted in the US, and it became an important artistic product of the anti-war movement. Thank you.